additional $50 billion over the next 5 years to minority-owned, Latino-owned, and Black-owned and other minority-owned businesses that we have as firm, either small disadvantaged business firms or as 8A firms, which is a very powerful program that we have had in place here at the Small Business Administration for several decades, and it's part of my portfolio. And so the president is really dedicated to the 8A program, which I can get into a little more, and wants to see it grow back to where it was during the Obama administration. It's almost about half now of the participants that we had back then in 2011. And so we're doing everything we can to make sure that Latino-owned businesses and women-owned businesses, service-disabled veteran, all the socioeconomic categories that we have, know that we're open for business, and we want them to be a part of this administration and to lend their expertise and bring their innovation, because that's how we move forward as a country, when we meet and engage with firms outside of the typical network of firms to actually.
We lost her. And I'm sure she'll come right back. And Joe, why don't you jump in until she can get back in? I don't know what happened there.
Sure. So just by way of background, so everyone is familiar. So we have a program at Goldman Sachs, which Letty is a proud graduate of, called 10,000 Small Businesses, which was launched about a little over 11 years ago. We now have over 11,000 graduates that have completed the program. It is, to explain simply, a 10-week, pretty hyper-intensive 100-hour business education that we now have, obviously, businesses across all 50 states that have completed it. It's delivered through community colleges across the United States. We also have a national program that is conducted with our academic partner, Babson College, which is located in Wellesley, Massachusetts. But it's an amazing program. We're very proud of it. We obviously follow the graduates very closely and measure their successes. And we're, really have been proud that 2/3 of the businesses that go through our program within just 6 months increase revenues, almost 50%, 47% to be exact, add jobs within 6 months. And arguably the most special thing about our program is that 86% of the businesses that go through it say that they end up doing business with one another. So that's kind of the special fabric of the community that is obviously all about the business owners and what makes it so special. And I would also note, and Letty is one of the best at this, but 2/3 of the businesses go on to mentor other businesses in our program. So it's really the continuity and the special community that has been built over the last decade plus that has made the program really special. But we announced last year, we're increasing the goal from 10,000 to 20,000. So we would encourage you, if you have any interest, to apply. It's a very simple website, www.10ksbapply.com. But please apply. We have, again, if you're outside the United States and Puerto Rico, we have almost 100 graduates from Puerto Rico. So you're welcome to apply and participate. And we'd love to have you join our community.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for sharing that. And Associate Administrator Hidalgo just joined us back. So we'll take
I'm back again.
You gotta love
Build back better, right? I am in a hotel room in Orlando, Florida, with a somewhat spotty connection, but I think we're going to be okay. So thank you for your patience here. So as I was saying, this is an important time for procurement as a policy and the impact that it can have on our country. The president did sign a racial equity executive order on his first day in office. And one of the things it says there is to look at procurement specifically. I think that is potentially the first time in the history of our country that such an executive order has gone out. And so that's why it's a game changer, because he recognized we need to do more in this space. But not only that, he actually said when he was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we have to do more for Black and Brown businesses, recognizing the two most underserved groups is an area where we need to focus to make sure that all minority groups, minority-owned businesses, all the talent is partnering with the federal government. We are the largest purchaser in the country and in the world at $560 billion a year. And I often say for any business who gets a federal agency as a client, you know, it goes such a long way to say, the United States is my client. Veterans Affairs is my direct client. Not subcontracting, which of course is critical and is a path to becoming a prime. But once you are a prime, to be able to say that to anybody opens so many doors. And that's what we realized. And it's a model for the world. I don't know of any other industrialized nation that has this type of model of our 23% overall small business goal out of that 560 billion. And then these 4 socioeconomic, as we call them, goals. These are goals that are mandated by Congress. And so it's up to us in the administration to figure out how we meet and exceed them. In this case, with the president's announcement, increase in the case of the small disadvantaged business goal.
Oh, thank you for sharing on that. And just to go back a little bit in my history, I actually used to own a bus company in Chicago. That's actually, during that time, I ended up meeting Goldman Sachs and heard about the 10,000 Small Business Program and applied, got in it. And just so you guys know, learning from the School of Hard Knocks was very difficult. And I tell people I was the valedictorian. But I had the federal government as a client with the bus company. And, you know, I think one of the biggest things is, it's amazing to do that, but I think at that time, I didn't realize how lucky I was. So I think sometimes as we look at the journey of small businesses, especially Latino small businesses, is we may not know what's in front of us in our clients or the opportunities of sharing with people that we have certain clients, and then how that could uplift our own brand and the opportunity to grow our business. So thank you for sharing that about how important it is. And I think obviously we'll get some information together to share with them so they can learn how to be able to sign up to do this with the federal government. Thank you again for coming today. I'm so excited about both of you guys. I know I've sent you a few emails, so thank you. And I know we made this happen. You know, what do you think, Associate Administrator Hidalgo, what do you think would be a massive asset of educating and telling Latinos to take the fear and put it to the side and go for it, to apply? Because, you know, so many people, and I know you get this, so let me just be transparent. They have so much fear about doing business with the federal government.
Yeah.
So it would be wonderful to hear from you, you know, what your insights are, your thoughts, and, you know, how do we get them over the hump to say, go do business, you know, with the federal government?
It is a big issue, Letty. And I realized this going back to the when I was in the Obama administration, and I was asked to go to the White House and lead an effort to get us to the 23% goal, which hadn't been met in close to a decade, the 23% overall small business. And so I staffed Valerie Jarrett, and we had the cabinet officials come to the White House every quarter to update us on what they were doing to move the needle on this. But back then, I realized there were not enough Latino-owned businesses asking about our approach. There were not enough organizations that were knocking on our door, and that I wanted to hear more from our Congress as well, and our CHC members. I heard a lot from the CBC members. And in fact, the 8A program came out of the civil rights movement, the 8A Minority Business Development Program. And unfortunately, we often refer to all these, as Joe, I'm sure knows, being a former federal official, everything is statute numbers and letters. But and so it did come out, it was the vision of Congressman Perrin Mitchell, recognizing that we needed to create a path for minority-owned businesses to partner with the government, given that this is such an important revenue source, given that it's the largest in the country. So if minority-owned businesses are cut off from it, that impacts our communities, our families, and our future. And so what I realized is that given that it was born out of the civil rights movement, the Black community are some of the strongest advocates around the United States to support the program. But it is time for Latino-owned businesses to do the same, Latino organizations. We want to hear from you. I'm so glad you are doing this today, because we want to hear more from Latino organizations to hold us accountable and say, what are you doing? How are you reaching more Latino businesses? How are you holding your 3,000 buying offices across the federal government accountable for connecting with us, for making sure that we can get our foot in the door, that the program managers will take the time to get to know our capabilities and give us a shot? Because ultimately, that's what's going to lead to more success and much more investment in our communities and really quality jobs. So when you go back to your original question of how can we do that? Part of it is, of course, looking at our certification programs, seeing where you might fit in those 4 socioeconomic goals that I mentioned. I just spent here, as I mentioned, I'm in Orlando. So I just spent some time with our Jacksonville office of SBA. Across the country, we have these offices with really dedicated teams that are here just for the small businesses. It's paid for by taxpayer dollars. It's services that can help the businesses figure out if they can qualify for any of the certifications, the 8A, the Hub Zone, women-owned small business, or service disabled veteran. And so that's a first step. And if they don't qualify for any of those 4, they can still qualify as a small disadvantaged business, most likely. And that's a self-certification process. So there are a lot of different avenues just to figure out, if they can qualify for any of those roles. And then it's about figuring out where you can provide your services. So it's really connecting directly with the federal agencies themselves. So via SBA, figuring out, is it Department of Energy? And then within each agency, there is what they call an Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. One of those great acronyms, the many thousands that we have, is OSDBU. But they're there to connect directly and facilitate engagement among the businesses and the opportunities that exist at the agency. So the first step is reaching out. It can be overwhelming, but reaching out and going to our resource partners around the country that are there for the businesses and that provide all the services that are free of charge. They can go to the sba.gov/contracting or just sba.gov website to see where in the country we have either a district office or some of our resource partners. We have a lot of now women-owned partner centers around the country. And so that's also an avenue for many of the women-owned Latina businesses to learn more about how they can connect with us.
Thank you for sharing all of that information. One thing I didn't mention to both of you guys, I'm obsessive on SBA and Goldman Sachs because I have learned so much, not only for myself, but for my clients and even my relationships and stakeholders out there. It's just like really helping them navigate some really kind of like very challenging, different, kind of like to understand some of the language. It's not a simple thing for the faint at heart, right? And so I just love you guys to death. And I love what the SBA, this current administration is doing. I do want to say that I felt when this administration was coming in, I felt that it was an administration of hope. And, we needed some inspiration and something to help us know that we could get back and we could be stronger together. I want to take it over to Joe and say, Joe, especially with what you're seeing, what you're leading, and I know you're doing so much at the Hill and helping on policy. What can you share for the Latino small businesses to see as opportunities of working with, whether it's a corporation or the federal government, but like how do you navigate these kind of difficult areas?
Yeah, well, thank you. So one thing I mentioned before, sort of how the foundation of 10,000 small businesses operates. What we did about a year and a half ago was launch what we refer to as 10,000 Small Businesses Voices, which is our advocacy program. It came to us about 3-4 years ago that, gosh, there's a real void for small business advocacy. We knew that our small business community really, wanted to be engaged both at the federal level, but also at the state and local level. So we, thought long and hard about it. And we're actually going to launch the advocacy program. And then COVID hit, and we decided to kind of accelerate the launch, just realizing obviously the need at the time to make sure that small businesses, had a voice in the process as the PPP program was coming together. And then obviously in the aftermath of that. So what we focused on this year are kind of two core issues. The first of which, is not by any means probably surprising, and that is access to capital, which is a pretty consistent issue for a lot of businesses, but obviously has been exacerbated by the pandemic. I'll just share a few stats. We did a survey in September of our 10,000 small businesses community, and if you just look at Latinx businesses, 70% say they are still struggling financially from the effects of the pandemic. 69% say they have less than 6 months cash on hand in the case of an emergency, whether that's a pandemic or a natural disaster or just a business disruption that they're obviously not foreseeing. And only 31% are very confident that they would be able to access capital should they need it. So one thing that we were really proud to work with both the Biden administration, the SBA on this year was making some modifications to the COVID EIDL program, which is a great initiative, and we're trying to do our best to spread the word. But the COVID EIDL program was created basically at the same time as the PPP program. Obviously, just about every small business went towards the PPP program because it was potentially, obviously, a grant program if you followed the rules of the road in terms of how you could spend it and such. And that was obviously an incredible outcome. The COVID EIDL program is a long-term 30-year low interest 3.75%. Initially, when it was created, back in late March of 2020, it had a loan cap of $150,000. That now has been raised to $2 million. And the sort of fundamentals of how you can use that loan were made, much more flexible by the good work of Bibi and her colleagues at the SBA and also at the White House. So they announced this about 6-8 weeks ago. The program technically expires at the end of the year. So I encourage everyone to read up on the COVID EIDL program if you need sort of flexible capital at a low interest rate, at a long duration. It's obviously an incredible way to go. I think what we've heard from a lot of businesses is that those who are seeking private capital right now are often finding difficult to get a low interest rate or get capital at all because of obviously what their financials look like from 2020. So obviously any bank or financial institution, fintech company is going to look at your prior financials, and 2020 was obviously a tough year for many. So access to capital is something we're obviously going to focus on into the future, but that's obviously a big theme. And the theme number 2 is obviously procurement. This is an issue that we started to hear a lot about from small business owners shortly after we launched the Voices program. And so we started to survey the question of do you think this is a problem? Do you think this is something we should focus on? And the numbers were pretty resounding that we should. And so we've formed a partnership with the Bipartisan Policy Center to issue a report on procurement reform in late June that included a lot of recommendations in terms of how the systems and the processes could be made, more accessible for small businesses. We, in September, kind of went a few layers deeper on our survey questions on procurement. We found that 41% of Latinx businesses have applied for a contract at the federal, state, or local level. But only if you segment that 41% population, only a third, 34% have applied at the federal level. So most of them, 83% have applied at the local level, about 2/3 have applied at the state level. So there's obviously a population out there of businesses that are doing a lot of work with the state and local governments, but are not, to your point, applying at the federal level, but obviously are a great pipeline of potential procurement contract holders in the Latinx community. So that's, obviously there's a lot of upside there in terms of increasing the goals, because obviously the businesses do exist and they're doing great work. They just need to apply at the federal level and get their foot in the door. So that's kind of been our focus in the last several months. And, I know the Biden administration is working on some executive actions when it comes to procurement. And I think, those will hopefully make a difference.
Thank you. I do want to say that I totally appreciate what you guys are doing at GS 10KSB because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm an alum. And then when you guys started the Voices, I got involved. I was a captain, didn't know what I was doing, but I was so excited. I just wanted to do it. That was June last year. Then again in January. And I have to tell you guys and everybody that's watching, I've been to the Hill prior to the Voices, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to say. I'd just be sitting in the room and someone would come in, either a staffer or legislator. And then I didn't know how to communicate whatever I would needed or wanted. And because of even like January, I have learned so much from what you guys are sharing and what I've also gone and researched that I was able to really build a relationship with legislators to talk about the issues, learned a lot of the more additional issues, but then I was able to educate a little bit there along the way and just kept running because we can't stop. And I do want to say, Associate Administrator Hidalgo, I really appreciate the SBA and all the work you guys are doing. I think one of the things we need to do is learn as Latino small businesses how to talk to whether it's federal government or state government or local government, and then communicate. And also, something I learned years ago is like, how should our products and services look like so that you guys are ready, whether it's a corporation or government, to say, okay, we'd like to procure from you after you do all your, checks and balances. I wanted to ask a question to either of you and both of you. What are your goals? I understand what the president has put forward. I know that Goldman's working on things, but what are the potential goals with the Latino community getting more involved? Are there potentially percentage goals? And please, I hope you don't mind, I have to include Puerto Rico because I'm Puerto Rican, and it breaks my heart to see still the massive struggles there and challenges. And I don't want Puerto Rico to be forgotten. And so whoever wants to talk on this point, I'd really appreciate it.
So in just a couple hours, I'm going to be giving a speech to the National Small Business Veterans Coalition. And then on Sunday, I am flying to Puerto Rico. So your timing is perfect. And I'm going to be meeting with the playing music, Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce, our district office, a number of manufacturers. About, I think it's something like 80% of small businesses are manufacturers on the island. So this is all a follow-up to the administrator's visit. She had a great visit several months back, but they asked if I could do a follow-up trip focused just on contracting. And in the meantime, I've been working with my team in government contracting to figure out what other commitments we could make to Puerto Rico and the district office there in particular, such as we've decided to assign another procurement center representative. I like to call them our watchtowers, and it's an incredible thing. We have close to 45 of the PCRs. The original intent was for it to be a much bigger program, because what they do is they look at the contracts that are being issued at the agencies. And if they see that a contract could have been set aside for a small business, or our commercial market representatives will look at a contract and notice that if they don't have a subcontracting plan, then they can escalate that all the way up to the secretary of the agency. So this team of watchtowers are the ones that watch a lot of these contracts closely. We don't have nearly enough of them, so they kind of have to do a cost benefit analysis in determining which contracts they'll review. But that's the kind of inside baseball that we're trying to figure out right now to create more access for Puerto Rican, firms on the island. And we recognize there's so much to do to build back the island and to make sure that There are strong investments and opportunities across the board. So I am committed to figuring out ways that we can do that through procurement. I do want to say, Joe, that I have long admired the 10,000 women-owned program. In particular, my brother and I had a firm for 6 years. He and I both worked for President Obama in the White House, but we started a firm advising corporations on their small and minority business strategy. And we were hired by a company, a healthcare company in New York. And we went around all of New York searching for some of the best minority-owned businesses, in particular Latino and Black-owned firms. There was one firm in particular in the Bronx, and I'm sure you're very familiar with her, Jessica Johnson,
Yeah.
who one of the firms that with whom we worked very closely to access pretty big, contract opportunities with hospital systems. And we spent almost a year trying to figure out how to get one of these firms $1 million contract. That was one of our goals, just $1 million contract. And she ultimately was the one that she got it with health and hospitals for close to $1.4 million. But she was just stellar. And I know that's in great part due to your program. So that is, in terms of, I do have some data here as far as what we're doing right now with contracting with Latino-owned businesses. We do about 10 billion in contracts, believe it or not. There are roughly 3,600 Latino-owned small businesses that receive contracts in fiscal year 20. Latino-owned firms earn roughly 15% of all small business construction contracts and 12% of all small business agricultural contracts. So imagine if Latino firms are awarded about 10 billion annually in procurement contracts, and the president has said he wants to increase small disadvantaged business contracting by 50 billion over the next 5 years. This is where we got to get very strategic. This is the moment. How do we create more access? How do we partner with nonprofits like yours and the Goldman Sachs program to move the needle? I will tell you, I did work previously at the US Treasury Department, and I often heard from some of the top Latino-owned asset managers in the United States who were asking, how can you make sure we get more access to financial agent agreements? And this is where Goldman Sachs can play a really important role, because Goldman Sachs is often one of the major corporations that has a financial agent agreement with the US Treasury Department. And here is where we can ensure that any type of procurement also includes higher margin activities, higher margin businesses, like investment banks, like asset managers. This was a small group, but incredibly talented firms that after the financial crisis in 2008, were able to find their way into Treasury and work with major corporations like Goldman Sachs to help monitor the funds that were being used in the TARP program at that time. So we need to get the firms back to Treasury and other places like that, so that we tap into the full complement of professional services that we have to offer, because that's where a lot more jobs are going to be created. And that's where the margins, as I mentioned, are just much greater. So firms like Martin Cabrera in Chicago has an investment bank. Monica Mantilla has an asset management firm. We need to grow that base so that we get more access to opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, Joe, what would you like to include in there?
No, it was great. I agree with everything Bibi said, but no, I mean, I think the big thing, just from from our own programmatic side, roughly 13% of our graduates are Latinx businesses. We obviously want to increase that. And we're excited that we now have a partnership with Jennifer Lopez, who's helping us recruit with her amazing both social media following, but her brand and lending a hand to us just to spread the word, which has been incredibly helpful. So we're very excited about that, just in terms of a new pipeline for recruitment. But it gets back to like a lot of our alumni, like Letty, spreading the word and, showing people that you don't have to be in the US to go through the program. You can be in Puerto Rico, you can be in any US territory, you can live in London, you can live, we're all over the world. So there's a ton of opportunity. The program's 100% free, totally paid for. And I think, you'll not only learn a lot, but you're also going to be part of a really special community if you join. And I think that's probably the most, special component of it, is just the alumni base and who you get to know. And as I mentioned before, one of the most remarkable data points is 86% of our graduates say that they have gone on to do business with one another, which is pretty remarkable. Mm-hmm. So that in and of itself is goal number one. Goal number two, which obviously Bibi spoke to, is, I think increasing, the diversity pool of businesses that are engaging in procurement, and making sure, that more and more businesses get access to these opportunities. Well, whether it's communicating, better about the opportunities, it's on us also in the classroom and in alumni engagement opportunities, to educate the business owners on best practices and give them advice, and have other business owners that have done procurement. Jessica Johnson's a great example. Show them kind of the road in terms of like, hey, I knew when I got into this, I was really scared. I didn't think it was worth my time, but, I ended up plowing ahead and I ended up getting a contract. And once I got my foot in the door, it was easy. It's like anything in life, right? That first one is going to be the toughest, just like your first job. But kind of once you get in, you kind of figure things out, and not to say it gets easy, but at least the sort of road ahead at that point. So I think, we obviously have a lot of work to do in that regard, but, we obviously look forward to partnering with the Biden administration, and other organizations to make sure that the small business community has access to the necessary information to get their foot in the door in the procurement space.
Thanks, Joe. And this is a nice segue into, why I wanted to do this particular panel was to really build an amazing opportunity and relationship with each of you, not just the entities you work for, because it's so critical, especially as Associate Administrator Hidalgo was saying about building relationships, is you have such a wealth of knowledge in your journey of your career. Each of you do, but then so does someone like myself, small business owners. I think if I can just be totally transparent, I look at that small business owners get discounted and undervalued all the time. And I think that that's the biggest error that anybody can make, because we are the creators and the founders of a Walmart, of a Uber, right? And so, we come up with these crazy ideas and people don't believe in the beginning, but then somehow, it could become that big, or it could be just, a mid-sized business or a smaller business, but we do this, and there's businesses around, especially Latino ones, that, have been around 30, 40 years. I don't know where, but we have a huge population in an area in Chicago called Little Village. It's a 3-mile radius, and they do massive amount of money and in such a short time frame. And it's a community of Latinos that I would say maybe 5% got educated on business. It's like we self-taught ourselves how to create, incorporate, and sell products. And I think a lot of people discount and don't realize that those mamas that are making, like cleaning the home, cooking, doing whatever, and selling on the streets or at someone's home, those are entrepreneurs. And, I would love to see in the future, especially because I'm the vice chair of the innovation, new committee, innovation and technology, is to maybe for the three of us at a different time to have a conversation at how can I support you guys? I'm out there and I'm talking it. I mean, people would think I work for each entity, like literally everybody here. But it's only because I've seen the value firsthand. And my goal is to bring that to the Latino community so that they're hearing it from my words or someone like myself, so that we are the endorsers for you guys, because marketing is one thing, but you can't buy what we authentically feel. I would love to know, Associate Administrator Hidalgo, what would you love to see happen in the next year for 2022 with Latino small businesses and Latina especially, because I'm sure you're both aware, and I'll mention this really quick. There was a white paper that was done in 2019, and in that white paper, it showed that there was 2.3 million Latina entrepreneurs, but the average of revenue in the year was $51,000, which just blew my mind away. Considering that when I had my bus company, it was multi-million annual per year. So I didn't know at that time, I was kind of like what you call that unicorn. And so, you know, I have this goal of transforming that, and I have something that I've worked on with a team to help Latina entrepreneurs and maybe triple that. But what are your goals where the Latinas are concerned? Because if you look at us historically, we are the fastest growing in business, but the support and as an underserved community is not always there. It's like we're doing it, but we're doing it by ourselves.
Yeah, well, you really, and first of all, feel free to call me Bibi, and we can be very informal. And you are really the model of what we need to strive for. And you have, you're in a place where you can have a big impact on Latino and businesses across the United States. You've done it, you've been there, you've partnered with the United States. And so part of it is getting out voices like yours to say it's manageable, it's doable. Here's how I managed that process. Here's how I got my foot in the door. And then I think with organizations like 10,000 Small Businesses, you know, the network that you provide, Joe, is so important in terms of bringing the businesses together to talk about how do we do this? How do we overcome our fears and access this, this incredible source of revenue? Then I often say on the flip side, we also need to be more accountable as well. So during the Obama administration, one of the things we did was we put the goals into the performance evaluations of the buyers. You know, it's just the KPIs, essentially, the key performance indicators. And wherever, and in particular, they had like the socioeconomic goals, the numbers just went up significantly. That's ultimately how we got to meet the 23% overall small business goal. So we need to make sure our buyers, those 3,000 offices, bless you, salud, are going out of their way to also meet the firms, to also engage the firms, because they've got a lot of work on their plate. They've got a lot of contracts to issue. Sometimes it's easier to just go with an option year or continue with the same vendor. So that's one of the things we're looking at, as Joe mentioned, that we're about to take some major actions. We are going to be announcing soon together with White House on just some of the things we're doing to move the needle within the federal government. What we noticed back then and now is you can have all the statutes and all the regulations imaginable, but if the incentives within the federal government are not aligned with the statute, then it's much easier to get around it, or it's harder for that buyer to then dedicate his or her attention. So that's where we're aligning incentives. That's part of the work that we're doing. So it comes on both sides. It's not just on the business owner, but it's also on us to get to the business owner. We were hopeful of passing a program through the reconciliation bill that was called, we called it Pathway to Prime. And, you know, as you know, there have been some major cuts. And so we're still trying to figure out ways with the current legislation, how we can leverage exactly, again, what Joe said about all of the Latino and minority-owned businesses that are working with city and local governments and state governments, because we know that's exactly what he said, that's part of our pipeline. So if we, our hope is to have like a hub and spoke model where we tap into that pipeline of local governments that have a really strong model, so that we could then feed the lists of firms that are doing business with local governments to federal buyers. It's exactly what we saw in New York, you know, with the work that my brother and I did there. after we identified some of the strongest in the city, those are just the firms that we need now to partner with us in the federal government. So, another way for Latino-owned businesses to approach this is to partner with their cities, with their jurisdictions, to say, we want more access to federal contracting. How can we partner together to create that access? How can we partner together to ensure that that the buyers are coming to our city and meeting with us, not just the city ones, but the federal and the state, and so that you have the full pipeline, the full continuum of contracting. That type of engagement would just be a game changer for the Latino community. But once again, we have got to have a strategy for that $50 billion over 5 years. And this is not something that we have to create legislation for. That is money that we have every year to do contracts, $560 billion. So that's why we often say it's about a strategy to target those resources in a meaningful way. It's not, typically you see purchasing as very esoteric and contracting, and it's like, no, let's break it down. This is about creating jobs. This is about tapping into innovation that we otherwise may never know about, like a firm that the administrator and I recently met in a small business owner in Maryland, who's on the cutting edge of fighting superbugs.
Wow. Fighting
superbugs. And they've already been able, the defense health agencies allow them to use this serum essentially that they've created on 40 cases, and they cured all of them. So they have a $32 million contract with the Defense Health Agency. I just came from meeting with a Latina-owned firm here in Orlando that does a lot of business with the U.S. Army, and she is remarkable. And so I think she has a total of something like 7 million in contracts with Army, believe it or not, creating simulations for medics who are basically performing surgery in the battlefield and don't necessarily have surgical training. She has created, I can't even begin to explain it. We just toured her whole facility, but these simulations where the medics can practically do like a full surgery on something beyond what would be typically a mannequin, because they actually have all the body parts.
That's amazing.
It's extraordinary.
As we wrap up here, one thing I do want to mention to both of you and everybody that's here is that we have a program here that we created called Latina Entrepreneurs Now, that reach out to us and we'll give you more information on what we're doing with Latinas and seminars and the future cohort that we're looking to launch, and hopefully have some blessings from our relationships here, our friends here. Can you each, I know we got to do this quickly, but can you each give one quick idea of go to action? Like, what would you just tell someone very quickly to, just inspire their souls?
Well, I guess I could start. I think so much of advocacy, which I think initially is kind of tough to grasp and tough to accept, is that it's very it's very unlikely that you're going to see kind of immediate results, right? So in some respects, you're investing in sort of a long duration of time where, like on access to capital, for instance, right? We're making incremental changes, which we're very excited about, don't get me wrong. But like, we've got a long way to go, right? In terms of like, really making a meaningful difference in the capital space. But the key to advocacy, and it's not by any means all that complicated, is you just have to constantly stay in front of your elected officials. Like, I always tell small business owners, like, think of them as your clients, right? You want to be constantly in front of them, whether that's informal, a more formal setting, but you want to be front of mind all the time. And whether that's having them do your business, to kind of tour it, to get to know you, but to also show them, like, you're a core part of your local community. And so, we've seen countless examples of business owners that have really never engaged before. There's a great story in the Los Angeles Times this week about a Black female-owned business, a woman by the name of Christine Page, who lives in Rhode Island, and she owns a wig company. And so we worked with Secretary Raimondo in the White House to put together a small business roundtable in Rhode Island this past summer with Vice President Harris and Secretary Raimondo. And of course, Secretary Raimondo was formerly the governor of Rhode Island and was very proud of 10,000 small businesses being in Rhode Island. And so she's been, you know, a long champion of the program. So anyway, Christine was one of the businesses invited to participate in the roundtable with the vice president. And so the headline of the Los Angeles Times story is this business owner's, you know, interaction with the vice president has completely changed her life. And that's because like that moment in time where she got to meet with the vice president, like suddenly like her brand went like viral and she has like countless new Instagram followers and Facebook followers and her sales are through the roof. And I mean, that's like a unique example of like how advocacy can actually also benefit your brand. But, you know, the more you're out in the community, whether you're meeting with elected officials or just community leaders, like that's good for you, right? The more you can network, the better. So, but that's just one example of someone who had like a really, you know, unique experience. And it's, you know, it's also inspired her to be a better advocate and to be more engaged, and also obviously helped her business along the way too.
That's a great story. I hate to say that we gotta wrap up. Over. Do you want to give one inspirational word, Bibi, that moves your soul? And as we're, you know, going to transition to another session, what word would that be? And then Joe, give me a word.
Patrick, my brother, who passed away March of 2020, and I'm doing this in honor of his legacy.
Oh, my heart goes out to you.
I mean, I think, you know, and this is not, I mean, that's incredibly touching, Bibi. I'm sorry to hear about your brother. I mean, resiliency, right? Because that's kind of the core of small businesses. And if you think about the pandemic, you know, I remember at the very beginning, like everyone, and obviously we lost countless thousands of small businesses ended up closing, but it's quite remarkable how many did not end up closing that very well could have, due to the large measure to the government's, you know, recovery relief efforts and their continued recovery and relief efforts that have helped a lot of businesses and their employees and their communities survive, you know, what was a you know, something that no one expected, you know, and it's a 1 in 100, I hope it's a 1 in 100 year incident, but, you know, something that obviously we've just never seen before that had the magnitude of such an impact that we're still feeling, you know, even almost 2 years later.
I think as I wrap this up, and I'm going to follow Bibi, my cousin passed away 2 weeks ago of COVID, and her name's Linda Vasquez. So this one's for Linda, and I want to tell you guys, thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to the future and what we can do together to impact Latino and especially Latina-owned businesses. And may you guys have amazing success in your work to help small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been so wonderful and great to be with Joe too. Thank you, Letty.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Abrazos. Muchísimas gracias.